So at this time, I get the pleasure of bringing up our keynote speaker of the hour. I told y'all already, dynamic, powerful, energetic, and just an anointed woman of God. So to you all, I want you to know we had a powerful morning. And now it's time to transition into an afternoon with a voice we are honored to welcome. Our keynote speaker brings insight, experience, and inspiration that aligns perfectly with the heart of today's symposium. Dr. Froswa Booker Drew is the president and CEO of Solstice Consultancy, founder of the Reconciliation and Restoration Foundation, and an author, speaker, and leader in philanthropy, organizational culture, and community impact. She also teaches at Tulane University and is a co-founder of several initiatives, including not heritage, y'all, Heritage, okay? Make sure you get it right. Heritage Giving Circle and the South Dallas Employment Project. Dr. Booker Drew is the recent recipient of the Spirit of SVP Social Venture Partners, of Dallas Award at the 25th Anniversary Philanthropy Party. So she has also published her latest book, Front Porch Wisdom, love the title, y'all, Front Porch Wisdom, which fills the gap in leadership books by focusing on faith and workplace journeys unique to women of color. I present Dr. Froswa Booker Drew.
Thank y'all for having me today. When she was reading that, I was like, oh, I am so tired. Oh, God, you just reminded me of not only why I have the white hair, but why I'm tired. But it's all good. It is a blessing to be in this space with you. To your amazing pastor, Richie Butler, who is also my ministry cohort leader and teacher. I was honored to be a part of this amazing cohort to accept my call into ministry. And this is the first time publicly I'm even saying it. It's like, ooh, that's... So Gary was a part of the cohort. It's so many friends in here that from St. Philip's and new friends that are here in this space. My mother is here with me. I'm grateful to be able to rock with her. Joan, thank you and the committee for making this happen. It speaks volumes when you all come out on a Saturday in July to come to something like this. It says to me that you are either hungry for knowledge and you're committed to your success and the success of your community. And so for that, I want to give you a round of applause for just being here. So, when I got the note about the theme today, I was like, oh my God, this is real what we are experiencing. This idea of navigating troubled times, not once, not twice, but again. We keep going through this. And I don't know if you're aware, but the Urban League just released their report this week. And I want to read to you one of the comments that was in the report by their CEO, Mark Murrell. And he says, almost daily since January 2025, the federal government, at the direction of the White House, has set fire to policies and entire departments dedicated to protecting civil and human rights, providing access to an equal education, fair housing, safe and effective health care, and ensuring that our democratic process is adhered to across the nation. The first seismic crack in the law's foundation came with the 2013 Shelby versus Holder decision, which gutted Section 5, the preclearance provision that had been the Voting Rights Act's firewall against discrimination. The erosion of these protections doesn't just risk disenfranchisement. It imperils the very legitimacy of the American democracy. We are in times that are unprecedented, that we have not faced before. I remember my daughter initially after the election coming in and being very concerned. She's good now, because when we talked about faith and what God is doing, she got all right. But she, like many other young people, have never seen and been in these experiences. And yet I want to challenge us. Y'all, we've been here before. This is not the first time in our community being under these kind of attacks. We find ourselves daily listening to headlines and watching social media. We're trying to sort through and figure out what's true. And with all this AI generation that's happening, it's so much disinformation that is and misinformation that is out there that is causing us to question what's real and what's not real. And this is the thing. Y'all, this is a spiritual battle that we're under. If you recognize it is a serious spirit of distraction and deception. Many of us, these things are going to be the demise of us, including me if I'm not careful, because it's easy to get on Instagram and watch cat videos. I enjoy cat videos. And watching the cats swipe at each other. And then I look up and go, oh my God, it's an hour and a half later. And I've done absolutely nothing but just burst out laughing. And I think that's the case for many of us. And our desire to disengage, if we're not careful, we're going to disconnect. And that's what is expected to happen, that we are so disconnected because we're tired of the breaking alerts that we get on our phones with New York Times. I know I am, because every time one comes on, I'm like, what did he do now? Oh my God, what are we going through? And we have to be careful, because the goal in this season is to get us disconnected from ourselves, disconnected from God, disconnected from each other. And we have to recognize that this is not something that's by happenstance. It's intentional. We are witnessing an onslaught of information that's hard to decipher between what is the truth and what's false. We are bearing witness to lives being impacted by decisions that have far-reaching consequences. And all of us in some way are impacted. Even if you think you're at a higher income level, when this health care really kicks in and what happens to the Affordable Care Act, many of us will be impacted, even those of us that are entrepreneurs. Our premiums are going to go through the roof. So we need to be aware that none of us are safe from being impacted. It's not just those people who are going to deal with it, it's all of us. And it's the balance of fighting for our rights and fighting for rest, because it's exhausting getting all this information. You want to get away. CEO Mark Morrell says something that I think it's important for us to know. He says, the work is difficult, the road is long, but we know from experience that the arc of history does not bend toward justice on its own. It must be bent by those with the strength and will to see it through. In order to see it through, though, y'all, we got to protect ourselves. We got to protect our minds, our bodies, our spirits, our hearts, our peace. It's not to dismiss that these attacks are going on, but it's to recognize we are in a battle for our sanity. And the season we find ourselves in is not new. As I was thinking about this topic, I remember my history professor at UT Arlington, Dr. Delaney, who is still around and a mentor and a friend. And I remember us talking about W.B. Du Bois, who came up about, well, he didn't come up with the term, but he talked about this term in his work called the nadir point. Nadir, and my mama told me, spell it, because some folks may not know what it is. I didn't know what it was, she said. It's N-A-D-I-R. And nadir basically means it's the lowest point for a group in society. And so Du Bois wrote about what was happening to Black people during his time long ago before we even got here. And he said that there were two periods in American history that Black people experienced their lowest point, the nadir. One of those was slavery. The other was right after slavery with Jim Crow. And it's important for us to know that after Reconstruction, many of us are unaware of this, but there were 1,500 plus Black folks who were in positions after Reconstruction. And this is like 1865 to 1877. And the thing that's so interesting that we don't typically know is there is a Black man, PBS Pinchback, who was actually a legislator who became governor of Louisiana. Now, he was only governor for a month, and they moved him out of that position quickly. But he was governor at that time. There were others in positions of power, like Hiram Revels or Blanche Bruce. And so you see all of these people moving into office. And then after Reconstruction, it changed. Sounds familiar? Very similar to what we're experiencing now. And so the period in the South after Reconstruction was named Jim Crow. And this was a time that has two very important elements to pay attention to. It's both the separation of the races. So it was challenging for people to figure out, what do we do with these slaves? And what's their status? What we know, though, from that period of time was the attempt was to keep Black folks in their place. Very interesting to note, which made it necessary to create a new physical and social distance between the races. The second feature of Jim Crow was this gradual disenfranchisement to take away people's ability to vote and have rights. And during this time, there was an increase in violence against African Americans. So you saw lynchings beginning to take place. During the 1890s, lynchings occurred with greater frequency than in any other decade. In 1892, 161 Black people were lynched in the South, the highest yearly total ever. And between 1882 and 1964, almost 3,500 Black people were lynched in the United States. So again, this isn't new. This is something that we've been through before. Looks different, has some different elements, but many of the same spirit is still around, which means we got work to do. And this is the thing that I think it's important to note. We can listen to this and go, wow, it was so horrible for Black people then. Y'all, Black people thrived, even in the midst of oppression. So I want us to note that even with this reality that is stark and questionable and has so much uncertainty and ambiguity, Black folks still lived. And what I want to challenge you today is, don't stop living your life because of what you see and the fear and uncertainty that comes with it. Despite all of this, Black folks were still doing things. Paul Laurence Dunbar, an amazing writer, was writing poetry during this time, giving voice to our experiences. And he served as an inspiration and a springboard for writers like Zora Neale Hurston or Langston Hughes. So the question is, who are we inspiring in this moment? The Urban League, formerly known as the National League on Urban Conditions Among Negroes, started in 1910. So here you have this organization that's still around, that existed to combat some of the same things we're fighting for now. But in the midst of this, you see organizations like Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority. They started these amazing organizations that many of us are a part of. And the beautiful thing is, we convened and connected despite all the oppression. One of my favorites in history was alive during this time, Ida B. Wells. Ida B. Wells is a favorite of mine because here's a woman who saw her two friends get murdered because they were prosperous. They had a store, and they were lynched. And she decided to write about their story and what happened to them. And even though she got ran out of town and had to run for her life, she spent her life chronicling and serving as a witness to our experiences. We need more Ida B. Wells. And this is what's amazing. She was a co-founder of the NAACP. So this lady did some amazing things. I remember a story during the women's rights movement. Susan B. Anthony and others were telling Ida B. Wells, hey, you can't march at the front of the line. And Ida B. Wells said, okay. They looked up, and she had her sign in the front of the line, still marching. We need more Ida B. Wells. Marcus Garvey, another favorite of mine, who started the Universal Negro Improvement Association. This was an organization that at its heyday in the early 1900s had over 1 million members. And he would do these parades in New York where people were called a Duchess of Ethiopia. And he was the one who really was the impetus for Black nationalism, where Black folks were proud. They weren't hiding in a moment that was telling them they were othered. Instead of that, he made people very proud of who they are. And I think there's some lessons in that for us, that in this moment, we shouldn't shrink back. Even our allies, don't shrink back, get louder. And then I think about Annie Malone, who's another person that many of us are unaware of. We know about Madam C.J. Walker, But we're not aware that Madam C.J. Walker became who she was because of Annie Malone. Annie Malone was a very wealthy woman. In 1902, started this college called Poro College, which was based on this society in West Africa called a Poro Society. And it was a secret organization that exemplified physicality and spirituality. So she used her school to train what were called Poro agents. She took folks from 16 to 80 years old and taught them about her hair care system. And she created entrepreneurship opportunities for others. This is the thing that's so interesting. She started this, and Madam C.J. Walker actually benefited because she was a Poro agent. And then she created her own Walker system. And this is the thing we don't always pay attention to. We think Madam C.J. Walker was the first Black female millionaire. She was the first female millionaire. And this woman used her money to be able to impact so many people's lives. And so what can we learn from these people that are our forefathers, our forerunners, the shoulders of giants that we stand on? Oppression should not stop you from thriving. Excel anyway. They started organizations to not only fight, but to convene and connect. One of the threads that I heard throughout today was relationships are important. We cannot isolate ourselves because that's part of the plan, is you get so isolated and so disconnected that you don't realize that the power is in community. So we need each other. So we gotta continue to support our organizations and if necessary, create new ones. And Annie Malone used the building that she had her school in to make sure that Black organizations could meet. Because again, during this time, segregation said you couldn't use public buildings. So she decided to use her building to help other people. How are we using the gifts and talents that God has given us to make sure that other people have opportunities as well? Marcus Garvey emphasized the importance of Black excellence and power. He didn't focus on the environment that they were in. He focused on the greatness that he knew that was within. And so what does it mean for us to be proud of who we are and to mobilize and recognize our power in numbers? Ida B. Wells was a witness and chose to use her voice to demonstrate the atrocities that she saw. She didn't allow that fear to stop her, but she used her voice to amplify what was happening. How are we using our voices to make sure that other people are at the table? And W.E.B. Du Bois, who came up with the term of the talented 10th, he basically was saying that, hey, those of us who have got to make sure that we're bringing others along. So how are we creating space for other people to have access and availability to opportunities? And then Madam C.J. Walker and Annie Malone, they were both wealthy and generous. So how do we use our resources to make sure people have access? What many people don't know is Howard University and a lot of Black organizations benefited from her wealth. What are we doing to use our resources to help others? Marcus Garvey said, a people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. Without reclaiming our past, being rooted in our faith, family, and focus, and being assured that God is at work even in the midst of this, we jeopardize being estranged from who we are and who we are called to be. So what does the Bible say? We're in a church, so that's important to make sure that we connect the dots to this. God provides us an example with the Israelites during their exile to Babylon. The Babylonian captivity or exile refers to the time period in Israel's history when Jews were taken captive by King Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon. It is an important period of biblical history because both the captivity or exile and the return and restoration of the Jewish nation were fulfillments of Old Testament prophecies. God used Babylon as his agent of judgment against Israel for their sins of idolatry and rebellion against him. And there were many times where there were different periods where they experienced captivity. But with each successive rebellion against Babylonian rule, Nebuchadnezzar would lead his armies against Judah until they laid siege to Jerusalem for over a year, taking captive many thousands of Jews and leaving Jerusalem in ruins. As prophesied in Scripture, the Jewish people would be allowed to return to Jerusalem after 70 years of exile, and that prophecy was fulfilled in 537 BC. And the Jews were allowed by King Cyrus of Persia to return to Israel and begin rebuilding the city and the temple. So what's the lesson in this? Don't let the ruins that you see stop the rebuilding, the restoring, the reconciling, and the radical imagination for a better future for our communities. And so what does God say? God says in Jeremiah 29, 4-6, this is what the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, says to all the exiles who were carried away from Jerusalem to Babylon: build houses and settle down, plant gardens and eat their produce, take wives and have sons and daughters, take wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, so that they too may have sons and daughters. Multiply there, do not decrease. Lesson for us. He says it again in Ezekiel 28 and 26. And there they will dwell securely, build houses and plant vineyards. They will dwell securely when I execute judgments against all those around them who treat them with contempt. They will know that I am the Lord their God. Amos 9 and 14 says, I will restore my people, Israel, from captivity. They will rebuild and inhabit the ruined cities. They will plant vineyards and drink their wine. They will make gardens and eat their fruit. So y'all, God is not surprised with what's going on. And he calls us to live our lives in the midst of this confusion and adversity and uncertainty. Our lives cannot stop because of what we are experiencing. God has a plan, and we are all a part of it. Jeremiah 29 and 11 declares, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. The question is, do we believe that? The word says in Acts 4, 34-35, there were no needy ones among them, because those who own lands or houses would sell their property, bring the proceeds from the sales, and lay them at the apostles' feet for distribution to anyone as he had need. So that says we got to take care of each other in these moments. Luke 12, 42 and 43 says, and the Lord answered, who then is the faithful and wise manager whom the master puts in charge of his servants to give them their portion at the proper time? Blessed is that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. So will God find us faithful when he returns? Or are we stewarding our gifts and talents, managing well the purpose for our existence? He will return. And is the work that we are doing consuming our time dedicated to building an earthly kingdom or a heavenly one? Scripture reminds us that we are in the world, but not of the world. There is a dual citizenship that we have, and we recognize these issues that we face here. But y'all, we cannot neglect our citizenship to come. We have been promised peace despite the foolishness and attempts to create anxiety and fear. We know that we have the victory. John 16 and 33 says, I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart. I have overcome the world. And let me be clear, I don't want to paint a picture of this pie in the sky, because while we're here, we do need to call out what's going on and what we're going through. And hoping for a better future, we cannot be irresponsible not to own what we are experiencing. The injustice and racial trauma is a legitimate mental health issue, with symptoms like hypervigilance, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion. We'll cut on the TV, I feel it in my spirit at times. I'm like, oh, I don't want to see any more of this stuff. But too many of our people have pushed through it, and it's cost us our very lives. I often tell young women, I heard the speaker earlier say this, pay attention to the loads that you're carrying, because many of us need to put down some stuff that does not belong to us, and it belongs to God. We need rest, and rest is a form of resistance. We can't just keep pushing through this. There's a book that I'm reading that's about the Sabbath, and it talks about how to restore these sacred rhythms of rest. God calls us to rest and not to strive. And so what does it mean when we really practice Sabbath in our lives? And then this is the cool thing that I think about when I look at God in the creation story. God did all this work, and then he stepped back and went, this is good. That's Sabbath. We don't do that. Most of us find what's wrong with everything we're doing. Well, I could do that better. Let me add this to the list. And we don't create these moments of Sabbath to sit back and look at what we've done throughout the week and go, y'all, I did that. That's what Sabbath is about. We need moments to celebrate and look back on our work with praise instead of finding fault. Trauma is a real part of our lives, and we can't ignore it. Lastly, as I think about trauma, I think about Eve. This has been interesting because I'm reading another book called Black Woman Grief, and I tend to read multiple books at one time. I don't advise that. Because then you quote something, people go, that's not in that book, and you're like, it might be. So this is the thing in this book, she blew my mind by talking about Eve. And she says that Eve was the first person to experience trauma. I never thought about that. So because we're grown in this room, let's think about it. Eve never had anyone to give her point of reference of intimacy with Adam. So here comes this man, doing what he's going to do. She has no point of reference of this. We never think about that. She couldn't call grandma and call her aunts and cousins and go, what's he doing? What is this? She didn't know. Childbirth. Who did she call? All of us have aunties and grandmas and mamas and friends who tell us, yeah, if your stomach is low, that means you're having a boy. I don't know if that's true yet. But we listen to those things and those stories because we have community around us telling us what to expect. Y'all, she didn't have that. She lost both of her sons, got separated out of the garden. You can't tell me that Eve did not experience trauma. And yet, God was walking with her through it. God is not surprised that we had his trauma, and yet God is walking through it with us. So what does it mean in our moments of pain, our moments of fear and anxiety, that we allow the presence and the power of the Holy Spirit to walk with us through our pain, not negating it, not dismissing it, but seeking God, seeking community and support when we need it. Y'all, we got this. We're going to talk about in a little bit the book that I wrote, but I wrote this book because front porches are important, and we'll talk a little bit about it. But what does it mean for us to create these spaces, for us to connect? We need each other. We need safe spaces. You might not actually have a front porch at your house, but what does it mean to have spaces like this? And we need wisdom. Our young people are craving for us to share our experiences. We have to forge these intergenerational opportunities so we can learn from each other. There is power in our testimony. There's a young lady I taught at UTA who told me about her grandmother never wanted to talk about what she went through. So how does she learn about the civil rights movement and the experiences of her grandmother if her grandmother is so ashamed and rooted in guilt and pain and won't talk about it? She's in bondage, and our young people then suffer because we won't share. Y'all, there's power in our testimonies. We also need to recognize that God has promised us an abundant life. It's not in our jobs, our bank accounts, or climbing the ladder. It's found in the cross. What's so powerful about the cross is it reaches up to God and out to man. It's not just symbolic. There's purpose in that cross. And in this time, we need both in our lives, not just to survive, but to thrive. And lastly, I need you to remember, you are the embodiment of generations of resistance and wisdom. Y'all, we got this.
Let's give her a standing ovation. We're praising God for Dr. Booker Drew. And being able to share her wisdom, her experiences with us today, in person and online. Listen, I am having a moment right now. This is like an Oprah Winfrey moment, because when I learned that she had this new book called Front Porch Wisdom, I'm a Prime member for a reason on Amazon. And so I said, when is it gonna arrive? Good, I can have my book, I can read it and have her autograph it. And voila, God was gracious. I got my autograph today, so thank you so much. So I say that because she wrote this book called Front Porch Wisdom, and just wanted to lift up some quotes that you wrote just to hear it back, your wisdom that you gave to us. And so one of the introduction is called Sit With Me on the Porch. All right, why do we need a porch? My parents, both my mom was a city girl. My dad is a country boy. They're cityfied now, okay? But oftentimes as a little girl, we would go back to the country to sit on the porch, to rock, to hear the wind, to pay attention to the people who would come by. And then we would be fortunate to talk about what we've seen and experienced in the midst of experiencing nature. And so
let us use this podium in the pews as our front porch today. And so that you talk about this book being a toolkit offering solutions, reassurance, and wisdom as you traverse your own workplace journey. After all, God's presence extends beyond the church and into the work we do. So what inspired you to write this book now and to call it Front Porch Wisdom?
So I'm going to be real honest. I didn't want to write the book. I was doing leadership circles for women of color that were national, and we were doing them online. And my last book, Empowering Charity, I wanted to work with InterVarsity Press. They said no. Baylor picked it up. InterVarsity Press saw the leadership circles, and they came to me. And they said, will you write a book on leadership and women of color? How do you say no to somebody you've been wanting to work with? So begrudgingly, I was like, oh, okay, we're going to write a book, because I really wanted to work with them. They're an amazing publisher, amazing Christian publisher. And so I decided to call it that because, to your point, front porches are critical to our history. And I think it's the demise of our communities that many of those are gone. See, they were connection points. I grew up in Shreveport. And so, all of my grandmothers and godmothers, my mother's godmother, they had front porches. And it was the neighborhood watch. So you could see who was going in whose house, who shouldn't have been, and they would talk about it. And it was the place for community. You get your hair braided, and people are talking and sharing. What's so sad now is we don't have those. We drive into our garage, and we don't know our neighbors. And we've lost that sense of community, and I believe that was such a critical part of it. And so I wanted to write something that would create figuratively this porch, using my experiences, using data, and using the word of God, because I don't think as women of color and women, period, people, period, see their lives connected to what the word says, and especially through their leadership journey. And so that's how it ended up coming about.
Thank you. And so you talk about two lessons that we acknowledge as leaders in your book. The first being that we need to submit to God. The second one is that the cross, and you just talked about that as an example of leadership, not only points up to God, but it also reaches out as well. So one of your chapters is called Rejection and Trauma in the Workplace. How is it that you could write a chapter like that and still submit to God?
Oh, wow. Because what I base that on is, and I'm going to talk about two characters in the book that we don't really pay attention to their trauma. Hagar is one. Here as I did the research, her life was one that she was royalty before she got sold into slavery. So how do you go from being royalty to serving somebody? We don't recognize that. We just kind of dismiss it. And so then you're in these people's space, don't know the culture, and you don't have autonomy over your body. The woman says to her husband, take her. It wasn't like Hagar said, yeah, this will be fun. She didn't do that. So she didn't even have the ability to say no to her body and what was happening to it. And then when she gets pregnant, then the woman gets mad at her. Couple lessons in that. Sometimes women, we do that to each other. And we don't realize, even in the workplace, that there's an oppressive system that's at work, and yet we participate in that system and hurting and harming each other. So that's something we got to unpack too. But that's what happened to her. And so you have this woman who is othered, who's different, and yet she meets God at the well. He sees her. And the beautiful thing is she's the first person to name God. And yet through the abuse and what she went through and being othered, God birthed a nation out of her too. So even in the midst of your oppression and problems that you have, God uses that. The other one that I talk about is Leah, because we don't often think about Leah in a positive way either. We're like, well, he didn't want her. And it's like, no, Leah was dismissed by her daddy. She was dismissed by her husband. And in the beginning, you see her having these babies that she's naming. Maybe he'll love me. Maybe he'll like me more. And by the end, she starts naming these babies, God, you got it, in essence. She's talking about how God is working with her and not focusing on what her husband is doing to her and her sister, what's going on. And I think we don't look at how these women have been othered in the Bible and see them as examples in our leadership that God can still work through our situations when they're not positive, when they're not pleasant. But God shows up and he delivers always.
God shows up and delivers always. So my remix, the Roberts translation to the Booker Drew quotation was, oppression is not an excuse to not excel.
Absolutely. It is not an excuse. You can still do great things, even if the great things, I think about a Timothy. Timothy was great, and we don't always give props to Eunice and Lois. So your greatness may even be the encourager and the teacher and the person who pushes people. It doesn't always have to be the name recognition. It's the things that God has given to us to steward well. You can still do that in the midst of whatever is going on outside of you.
Thank you. So we're going to open it up if you have any questions. And again, the book is called what? Front Porch Wisdom. Amen. It's written not just for the othered people that, women, but it's also a testament to how men can understand the stories of othered women and bring that conversation into the tables where they're the menu and not invited to talk on behalf of their otherness. So is there anyone else who might have a question or two about what you've heard this morning, this afternoon, and how we can take what has been somewhat deprived of us and bring it to the forefront of the work that we have in our hands and at our feet to be the church outside of the walls and to know that mental health is something to be aware of. Their mics. Amen.
Amen.
I want to say thank you for the front porch. Our home, when I grew up in Gary, Indiana, I had a front porch. And we spent a lot of time on the front porch. And it was that place where my mother could see what we were doing when we were outside playing, like all the way down the block in both directions. So you could never really get away from, her guidance. And by the time you got home, if you were doing something wrong, well, she knew about it. And so other people in the neighborhood had front porches as well. And so it created a family in the neighborhood. It created not one mother, but, maybe 5 more that were always watching. So I was looking on my phone. I'm like, I got to order this book and, just grasp on to memories and that which we had as a people before as we learned who we needed to be as African-American men and women. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. You made me go back thinking about when I was growing up in Shreveport. Mama is going to laugh when I tell this story. But the kids would play in the neighborhood. You don't see children playing outside in the same way like we used to. And when the street light would come on, you knew what that meant.
Oh, yeah.
You not head back. You better have been at home. There is an old man in the neighborhood, Mr. Levi, and he drove 5 miles an hour. I kid you not. He was so slow. So the children would do this race. They'd see him backing out, and they would wait on him. And Mr. Levi finally figured out that the children were racing his truck. They see him coming home, and they'd run up to the truck, and they start talking and running and speed up against him. And Mr. Levi would get so frustrated that these kids found so much fun in his tardiness and slowness. Those were the kinds of things that we did, and it was the whole community. All the kids were outside playing. Our children don't have those opportunities anymore because they're on these. And so what does it mean for us to really be intentional about those memories that we have from the past? And it's not going to look the same for our children. But we've got to make sure that they have those kinds of community experiences because it shaped each and every one of us. We have fond memories of the Mr. Levi's and, for me, Miss Jenny's and all those folks who were on the front porch. So thank you. Hey, Karen.
Thank you so much. This brought back so many memories to me because, unlike your experience, I am a country girl. I mean the country. I was born and raised in the country, and the front porch was a place of communication. It was a place where the family gathered, especially during the summer, it was a cool place. We ate out on the front porch. When we had birthday parties, it was out in the front yard there on the front porch. There was lessons taught on the front porch that in terms of a family, to know who we are, to value our name. Yes. My parents had a thing about what we do, and the worst thing you could ever do is to steal and lie. These are things that you just didn't do, and you honored the family name. So the front porch was a place of communication, and when times change and we had got the patio where we're on the back of the house, we don't get to see the neighbors, we don't get to greet each other. Someone on the highway, you know the car, you're waving at them.
Yes.
The front porch was a great place.
Yes.
And thank you so much for reminding us.
Yes, yes, thank you.
And as we close out, I have a question for you. So for generations, I won't date you myself, but for generations that didn't have a front porch or growing up in the digital age, because I know I'm a digital baby and that's just what I do. But there are some things that I want to get a book and write some things and highlight some things. And so for those persons who are up and coming, our teenagers, our young adults, our working professionals that are having to start again, what is your advice for bringing this front porch wisdom in spaces of the kitchens or podcast or video chatting or video conferences so that they know they have a place to be able to be vulnerable in a healthy way, and especially when they're having a mental challenge that they can overcome? What's your advice for that?
Biblically, Paul says older women, older men, we are supposed to be doing that for our community. And as much as we want to talk about young people not doing right and they're out twerking and doing all the things, the reality is they don't often have our presence. And so we have to take responsibility for what we're seeing. We also have to recognize that when we say things like, that's not how we did it, it's a different world. I tell people all the time, if there was Instagram when I was growing up, I would be a very different person now. Might not be here speaking with you, could possibly be in jail. I mean, I'm just being honest. I would have been such a different person because of the influences of people liking stuff. You got to dress a certain way, you want attention. It's so sad to see what our babies are having to go through. It's not our reality, and we can't impose that on them and go, you got to do it the way we did it. It's not going to work. It's a different set of variables that they have. But what they do want is wisdom. They do want community. And so what does it mean for us to build relationships with young people and not try to fix their stuff, but to listen and be there? One of the best things that healed my relationship with my daughter was, I remember I went to this conference and this young lady got up and she said she had been trafficked. And they dropped her off in the parking lot, at a gas station. And she's just there in the parking lot and she's covered in blood. She said, and this lady walked up to her and put her arms around her. She said, and the lady didn't go, oh, God's got it. Oh, you gonna be all right? She said, because in that moment, she didn't feel like it was gonna be okay. She didn't know where God was. She said, but what that lady did was she saw her. And she said she held her and just caressed her hair, called the police, stayed there with her. She said, I've never seen that lady since. She said she was an angel for me. She said, but she saw me. I think for us, we got to see our young people. It's not correcting them and telling them they're wrong all the time. It's just embracing them and going, I see you and I love you in spite of. That's what we need to do.
Well stated. So here we are talking about the wisdom of the front porch, and we'll turn it back over to Patricia Jones, mistress of ceremonies today, and we thank you for staying the long haul.